But he had said that the color green was stupid, and it's called lanterns because we all agree the color green is stupid, the actual quote. And of course, as fandom is wont to do, they jumped all over this and went hysterical and pulled their hair and shrieked and screamed. And I kind of could tell by the tenor of what he was saying that it was just a joke, a poorly conceived joke, because, geeks and nerds are not really known for being able to take a joke too well. And it didn't help, admittedly, that the show looks very dry and dull and colorless. So making a joke about that while you have that kind of presentation was likely not to go over very well. I did say even last show I thought it was a joke. I thought it was just him being cracking wise, and it was just not meant to be something to take seriously. Well, he came out after Grant Morrison, the comic book legend Grant Morrison, criticized Lindelof, saying it was a jockish dismissal of superhero conventions. Now, again, I don't disagree with the sentiment that, yeah, if you think the color green is stupid or calling something Green Lantern is stupid, you ought not be working on the property. But again, I feel like, and that's the reason why we're doing this segment, because this segment is really just called Are Fans Victims Now? Is fandom comprised of victims? That's the way it feels to me. It feels to me like everybody is looking to be offended. And that's why I see the sea change of the leftists wanting to cancel people, the woke, and they were trying to force the woke in, and they were trying to, ostracize anybody who wasn't playing by their set of rules. And it feels like it's almost the same thing now, shifted on the right side, because the right wing is sort of a stiff and humorless and constantly looking to be offended. And that's like what the leftists were always known as. And I feel like that's what we're being known for all of a sudden. When we look at every single slight like this as if it was the end of the world. Now, I don't think the guy was being serious, but I'm sure people are going to look at his apology, which I guess I'll read as well. And they're going to look at this and act like he's doing damage control. He doesn't mean it. It wasn't a joke. He hates us. And this whole concept of us being hated as a fandom. Now, I understand that the woke era dies hard. It really is. It was a painful moment in fandom history. But I don't feel like we should consider ourselves victims because what we have been through. We've come through the other side. Now, a lot of people will say the woke isn't dead. I think the woke isn't dead, but it is dying. I've never said the woke is dead because I think so long as we still have projects that were conceived during the woke era that are just now being burned off. Wonder Man, the race changed Wonder Man, that was already in the pipeline. They just dropped it all on Disney Plus. Same thing with Ironheart. That was going to be their big cornerstone of the MCU. They dropped it on Disney Plus with no fanfare to get it all out of the way. I think the same thing could be said of probably Starfleet Academy. That was conceived in that era of the woke, and they basically committed to it and were like, we're just going to put it out there. If you look at what is being greenlit now, what is being greenlit now is not woke anymore, at least what we see of it now. I don't know if they can change these things in the future, which I don't have this prepared as a big slideshow. But for instance, the Scooby-Doo Netflix, I suppose it's a reboot. I don't really know what you would call it. It's a new series, live action. And it's honestly looking very authentic. It's a full white cast that looks like the characters. I know McKenna Grace is playing Daphne, and the other characters sort of look like their analogs, I guess, in the cartoon. I don't know the actors' names. This looks like, and from all expectations of Netflix, this looks like something that looks pretty good. I don't understand really where people are saying that the woke is still an ongoing thing that is going to haunt our steps for the rest of our lives. I think there's going to come a point where these people that want the woke to continue for the grift are going to have to ask themselves, you know, where do you declare a victory? Because you see all the usual suspects. I don't have to even name them all, but they're all the big YouTube channels. They're willing to pounce on whatever it is with a gleam in their eye, telling you that it's woke, telling you this is going to be bad, telling you it's bad news. Look what they're doing. And most of the time, it's like the most mundane stuff imaginable. I mean, it's oh look, they cast this person here. This means it's going to be bad. I don't know. We don't know until we actually see some evidence of it. I'm not going to jump all over everything with that kind of you know information being lacking. That's like the Tangled live action movie. Um, they cast two actors who actually look like the animated figures. They cast a white actress and a white actor to play Rapunzel and Flynn. And people are like, "Well, this can't be. This it just can't be. The woke is still a factor." Well, all things being greenlit now look like they are being done with an eye for mass appeal. It doesn't look like they're trying to do things for the modern audience anymore, and quote unquote the modern audience. I feel like we are just setting ourselves up as victims, because if you can't enjoy anything anymore and you know, you've got one foot already in the negative zone, so to speak. If you see the glass half full before the show ever airs, ever broadcasts, or the movie ever comes out, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage, because, you know, we're not dealing with a company anymore, none of these studios anymore that are receiving the DEI money that they were when Biden was president, and the whole thing started under Obama. A lot of people don't want to admit that Trump has put an end to that stuff. And so we are not financing, because the famous line, in the 2020, the early 2020s, and maybe the late 20 teens was go woke, get broke. But it really wasn't true, and that's why things kept being created that nobody wanted to see, that nobody was watching, because they were being financed by DEI money. I forget it was called ESG back then, from what I remember, but they were basically, studios were getting paid, and whether it be TV or film, with how many minorities were cast, and if the LGBTQ were all represented, or if there was a woman in a prominent role. And that's not the way you create fiction, because you can't have it be a test of demographics, of you have to appeal to each and every one. That's not the way stories are told organically. Now, of course, I'm the same as pretty much anybody, where you want to have some variety. You know what I mean? I don't have a problem, obviously, with Jon Stewart being in the same TV show as Hal, but then you're faced with the problem of, is it going to be woke, where they're just trying to show Hal as the out of touch white guy, the maverick that doesn't really have it anymore, and Jon Stewart is sort of the up and comer, and he happens to be black, but he can do the job better than Hal, who was by all accounts a legend in the Green Lantern Corps. It's understandable that we have these concerns. Now, I don't think it's going to be as bad as all that. The problem with Lanterns is that Warner Brothers, DC, whatever the permutation of the figureheads in charge of that, were deathly afraid of this franchise after what happened with the Green Lantern film with Ryan Reynolds. Um, it became sort of a joke. Ryan Reynolds beat that joke into the ground, I think, every chance he could get because he didn't like the movie himself, which was a shame. I didn't think it was that bad. It wasn't good. It wasn't great, at least. I would say it was good enough. I mean, I think sometimes you have to remember you can start poorly and end strong. I mean, I always point back at Star Trek: The Motion Picture, giving birth to Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Now, you could have kept on with the Green Lantern movie and made a sequel out of it and just made a Wrath of Khan that was a whole lot better than the previous picture. But they scrapped everything and they went back to formula, so to speak. And so again, I don't understand this loser mentality. Like we're thinking, oh, we're never going to get good films again. We're never. Honestly, I have to say this, and I'm going to say this as honestly as I know how. Last year was the best year for movies for me personally that I've witnessed in a long time. Not since the heyday of Marvel and the MCU when like phase 1 and 2. Last year, I really loved Superman. I really loved the Fantastic Four, and I even liked the Captain America Falcon one, whatever that was called. It was pretty good. I watched it on DVD more than once. So, I mean, it wasn't bad. Now, people will, poo poo that because, we don't want Sam Wilson Captain America. That's fine. I agree with that. I don't want Sam Wilson Captain America. But it really wasn't that bad of a movie. It was entertaining. I enjoyed what they did with the Hulk subplots, at least. Didn't really care for Thunderbolts. But again, I thought Fantastic Four was pretty solid. It wasn't everything I wanted in a Fantastic Four movie, but it was solid. And the same can be said for Superman. I mean, it's not without fault, but people want to tear it down as if it was something terrible. I mean, of course, a lot of it is the Snyder Bros that, will just worship Snyder as a god emperor. But, those people have the right to their opinion, and that's fine. But to try to tear down the Superman 25 just because Gunn was involved, and Gunn isn't particularly, a great director. I mean, I would say, like I always say, that, I've hated as many movies of his that I've seen as I liked. I mean, so I'm not defending him out of a blind, you know, um, fanboy perspective or a blind obedience to his outlook, but he has the sensibilities of knowing how to do a superhero project. Unlike Lanterns, as we see right here, it seems devoid of any of the trappings that you would say would encompass a superhero pictures. Now, before we finish it, we've gone on almost an hour, but let me read what Lindelof's remarks were here. I have upset Grant Morrison, which means I have now ticked off most of the brilliant British Scottish comics writers that I grew up idolizing. I made a dumb joke on a comedy podcast. I'm not going to bob and weave about context. The joke was dumb. The fandom is not. I owe them an explanation and a genuine reflection of my actual feelings. I don't know if I got the whole quote here. Green is not stupid. It is my lifelong favorite color, and I have a questionnaire that I filled out in third grade to prove it. Green is bleeping awesome. Let's see. More importantly, it would be a betrayal to everyone I worked for and alongside to say something other than I was absolutely honored to be a part of the team that manifested the incredible construct that is Lanterns, because I was sloppy and careless with my words. Ironic considering I care so much about Hal, John, and the entire Corps. I can and will do better and be worthy of the oath. Until then, I'll let the show speak for itself, and I can't wait for you to hear what it has to say. So again, I don't know if the show's going to be any good. I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to enjoy it, but I don't feel like they were trying to offend us. Again, I don't feel like the fandom is ready to move on yet from the heartbreaks of the woke era. And I feel like we're going to be putting ourselves in a position where we're just asking for heartbreak. We're just asking to be disappointed. And, that's sort of the mindset of a lot of fans now. And it's a very rigid and unfeeling mindset that you can't just move on with life and be able to, enjoy things as they come and take each project as they come. Now, this project, they were afraid of the colorful and the bright and the fun and the heroic. They made it grim and gritty. Now, that is not reflective of the whole of what Warner Brothers, DC, or Gunn has planned. It could be very different. The next project, and the same thing with all these other studios with Marvel. I think they're trying to right the ship when it comes to the Avengers and so forth. I don't know how it's going to work out. Probably it's a soft reboot. Uh, we also have Star Wars again trying to rehabilitate itself after sort of taking itself off the big screen for so long. So again, there's just there's not going to be anything there for you if you don't allow it to be there for you. And that's sort of the saddest thing of all is when the fandom does it to themselves. Because again, I think we're pretty much past the heart of the woke storm. And I think what we need to do now going forward is to sort of apprise everything individually and not look at it through the lens of, is it woke? Is it going to offend us? I mean, if you take a look at Snow White, the last one, that was another one that Disney just dumped in theaters. They tried desperately to retool it and make it somewhat palatable to the movie going fan. It didn't happen. And if there's no money to be made, it's they're not going to keep putting out failure after failure. And the thing is people don't seem to understand. Everybody keeps acting like, well, the superhero movie's going down. Nobody's going to be going to movies anymore because they're all played out. The you can throw Star Wars in with that as well, and then But the thing is, as I said in the last segment, Sony is going to go back to doing their solo Spider-Man adjacent slash villain films, and none of those films made money except like Venom. Maybe the first one was a significant hit. The next two declined in sales and in popularity, but they still made money. Same thing with all the other ones. They will not continue making films if they're not making money. And the reason why they're going back to making these films is because they do make money. People don't want to factor in the toy merch, the DVD sales, the t-shirts, this and that. They're not going to be, completely at a loss with any superhero property. That's why they are never going to go away. I think people seem to have in their minds, you know, superhero fatigue, the superhero genre is played out. The superhero genre is never going to be played out because these films are still going to make some kind of money for them. They are never going to get rid of these properties. The only reason why other studios got rid of these properties is because they were going under. When 20th Century Fox went under, we got Fantastic Four and Daredevil back. But that's because that studio was going to be assimilated into something else that was bought off by another company. Sony is still doing good enough where they're going to keep the hold of Spider-Man and they're going to still make movies of Spider-Man. Spider-Man is never going away. Batman is never going away. He's so popular that no matter what you do, he's going to get a movie. Superman, still popular. Superman is not $1 billion character, but he's popular enough that he's going to make money. They're not going to get rid of these characters. These characters are proven money makers for them. And in the right hands, they can be $1 billion money makers. As I said on Twitter, Aquaman, now, of course, notwithstanding that Jason Momoa has a large female following that probably boosted those numbers somewhat. Aquaman was $1 billion movie because James Wan was actually a fan of the property. He actually made those costumes look like the comics. And when you have other characters in the movies and Black Manta, the costume was perfect. Amber Heard, as much as everybody wants to, come down on her, was the perfect mirror. She looked just like she stepped off the page. James Wan was stuck with Jason Momoa because, Snyder picked him and it was something that he had to work around. But of course, Momoa had his fans that made up for it. But again, you can take even a C-lister, like, I mean, Aquaman wasn't really ever taken seriously. You can take a C-lister like Aquaman and give him $1 billion movie. These films are not going anywhere. People don't seem to understand that. These films are not going anywhere. They're money makers in the works. And of course, it takes the right people behind them, which doesn't happen, all the time, probably not often enough. But I think it happens enough that you're going to see more hits than misses going forward, because I think that we're coming out of that woke phase where people are going to be focusing on the positives. They're going to be trying to give you, again, with Gunn's Man of Tomorrow, we're already, we're still building into that. I mean, I think Jon Stewart is going to be in that film. That's another slight tidbit of news that broke. Jon Stewart's going to be in Man of Tomorrow. They're building up to a Justice League. It won't be long before we have our Wonder Woman movie and Batman movie, and they're not just going to, go away because Snyder Bros are upset that there's a new franchise on the horizon that's not going to involve Snyder and the, you know, motley crew of actors that he chose for the roles that were pretty far off the mark, if you want to be honest. All right, so once again, thank you for tuning in. I know I just have a occasion to ramble every once in a while. If you have not liked, shared, and subscribed, please do so now before the show is over. And once again, remember that The Adventures of Bullets Bourbon Private Eye is within your reach. If you just click the link in the description below, you can go to the website. You can check out the Global Comics sale as it is in the final days. You can still get the half price issues, and that also extends to the graphic novels. Of course, not the bundles, but get them all individually. I guess it would probably be cheaper for now. And I will continue to burn the midnight oil to try to get the Bullets Bourbon Gimme Shelter issue 14 out this year. I'm pretty sure I can get it out sometime this year, but unfortunately the May date that I was shooting for is probably most definitely not going to happen. All right, so that about wraps it up. Until next we meet, this is Johnny Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.